Hi everyone, my name is Carrie Schved. I'm the Education Director at White Memorial Conservation Center, and welcome to the first edition of Nature's News. Now I know a lot of us are spending a lot more time at home these days, but hopefully you're getting a chance to go outside, get some fresh air, and while you're out there, keep your eyes peeled and take a listen for some of the really cool events that are happening in nature right now. April is such a vibrant time of year here in New England, so I'm going to take the opportunity to show you some of these amazing things. I'm going to go on my own adventures both in my yard and at White Memorial, and I'm going to show you a sampling of some of the natural events that are occurring as we speak. And hopefully you'll get a chance to go out in your own yards and witness the same amazing phenomenon. All right, let's start with the wildflowers, since they're bursting with color these days. Now, you probably have already seen non-native flowers such as forsythias and daffodils and crocuses in bloom, but there are some native wildflowers that are coming up right now as well, just like these beautiful little flowers called bluets. Now, we call them bluets because usually they have at least some blue in them, but I just happened to find a patch in my yard that are completely white. But no matter the color, the shape is pretty much the same. We have these tiny, tiny little flowers. There's my hand just for comparison. And you can see they're so tiny, they only stand about a half of an inch to an inch high on the ground. They've got those yellow centers and those 4 petals. Beautiful little native wildflowers that you can find just growing in your own yard. If you have any red maple trees in your yard, you might be seeing little flecks of red on the ground in your yard, and those are actually the flowers of the red maple tree. Aren't they beautiful? Turns out red maple trees produce flowers before they even leaf out for the season. And those flowers are now dropping down to the ground, and I'm seeing them all over my lawn. Here's another beautiful wildflower to be on the lookout for. This is called a trout lily. I have the leaves in my yard, but I don't have a flower yet. Here's what the leaves look like. This is actually where they get the name trout lily from, because the leaves almost look like the patterning on a trout, the fish. So only 1% of the trout lilies in nature actually produce this beautiful flower per year. So what a cool treasure hunt to try to find a flowering trout lily with those yellow bell-shaped flowers and the anthers coming out, those bright maroon anthers. Here's another look at one that's closed up, but you can see, if I can get it in focus here, you can see those leaves again. And turns out these are mostly in shaded areas. They're one of the earliest flowers to bloom around here, but usually you have to be in a forested or a heavily shaded area. So if you're taking a walk in the woods, or if you happen to have a shady spot in your lawn, take a look. First, try to find those speckled leaves, those trout-looking leaves, and then if you're really lucky, you might actually see a flowering trout lily. They're also called adder's tongue and dogtooth violet, but violet is a misnomer because really they are a type of lily. And I just want to make sure I give credit where credit's due. These pictures that I'm using and a lot of the information is coming from a book called Naturally Curious by Mary Holland. And this book so beautifully goes over the phenology, the naturally occurring events in New England. She does it month by month. So if you're interested in what's happening in our area and when it happens, I highly recommend this book by Mary Holland. I'm going to use Mary's book again to just give some insect news real quick. We're all familiar with the woolly bear caterpillar. The question is, what do these guys turn into? Turns out their adult stage is called the Isabella tiger moth, which is a pretty bland looking moth, pretty much a tannish brownish color, but their caterpillars are very familiar to all of us. And April is a good time to be on the lookout for woolly bears because they are coming out of hibernation. So they have spent the entire winter either underground or under logs, under rocks, as this caterpillar stage. And now they're coming out. They're going to spend a few more weeks eating and growing, and then they will go into their pupal stage, which is a cocoon. Turns out their cocoon is made out of the same hairs that are on their body as a larva. So their cocoon is made out of those same hairs that you're seeing right there in the picture. And then they will eventually metamorphose into Isabella tiger moths and fly off and spend a few more weeks alive as adults. Has anybody heard this call before? That is the trill, the long trill of the American toad. That is their mating call. So American toads have now come out of hibernation, and the males are calling to attract the females, and that is the sound that they make. So listen for that sound. And in just a few days, you might end up going down to a pond and seeing some toad eggs in your pond. They're in these strings as opposed to clumps of some other types of amphibians. So look for these strings of black eggs. Those are toad eggs, American toad eggs. How about a live animal now for your viewing pleasure? This is Rocky. Rocky's an eastern box turtle, and April is the time when box turtles are coming out of hibernation. Now, typically, there are more box turtles down by the shore of Connecticut than in this northwest corner. But if you happen to be down by the shore, taking a hike in one of those parks or protected areas, be on the lookout for eastern box turtles. They are fairly rare, so it would be quite a sight to see one of these in the wild. Now, I have Rocky here. He's one of our education animals at White Memorial. He's been with us for many, many years. He's probably the most outgoing box turtle I've ever met. As you can see, he's out of his shell right now. Look at those beautiful red eyes. Here's a fun fact. In box turtles, the males have red eyes, and the females have brown eyes. So with his bright red eyes, you can definitely tell this is a male box turtle. Now, why do we call him a box turtle? Well, that has to do with what is underneath his shell. If you look right under there, you'll see a line. That line is actually a hinge. And that hinge on his shell allows him to open or close his shell. So right now, his shell, the top and bottom shell are open wide. He is out. He is being very curious. Oh, what's on this phone? Cutie. But if he were to get scared or threatened, he would pull all of his body parts back into the shell, and then he would actually use that hinge to close the top and bottom shell so tight that nothing would be able to get in there to try to hurt him. So because they can open and close their shell like a box, that is where they get the nickname or the name box turtle. Let's discuss a few bird species, and we'll start off with our official state bird, the American robin. They are very distinguishable by sight, but you might not know what they sound like. So let me play the sound really quick. It almost sounds like they're saying, cheery up, cheerio, cheerily. Very happy sound, and they call a lot in the morning. So if you happen to be an early riser, you might hear a chorus of American robins calling. Now, this is about the time of year that they are building their first nest. This is what robin nests look like. The foundation, most of the nest is made up of mud, but then they are lined with fine grasses and stalks of different types of plants. And this is what their eggs look like. That beautiful blue color. They can have several eggs. We just happen to have one here, but look at the color on that egg. Isn't that gorgeous? Now, right about now, they're building their nests in conifer trees or evergreen shrubs because the leaves of those plants and trees provide protection for the nest. Later on in the year, when they go to have their second brood, they will probably choose a deciduous tree once those trees have leafed out. Now, a lot of people tend to think of the robin as a good indicator of spring, but we can actually have robins in southern New England all winter long. This type of bird, I think, is an even more accurate spring harbinger. This is the eastern Phoebe, and all of these birds fly south during the winter and then come back in the spring, and as soon as they get back, they immediately establish their territories and start calling. The call of the Phoebe, well, that's what they're named after. Their call sounds like Phoebe, 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 Phoebe. So if you hear that call, you know you've got an eastern Phoebe living near you. And in fact, they do tend to build their nests on human structures. A lot of times it's under an eave or over a doorway, maybe even on a rafter in a barn. Their nests are made out of mud, but then lined with very fine grasses and mosses. And so you could even have one of these on one of your structures on your property. I know we do. All right, let's move on to some newsworthy events with our mammals. A lot of you see deer on your property. This is a time to take a close look at those deer as they're walking through. See if they happen to have any antlers starting to grow on their heads. This is the time of year when bucks are starting to grow their antlers for the year. So in the picture you see behind me, that is a buck with full-grown antlers. They don't usually get to that size until July, August, September, but April is when they're starting to grow them. So look for small buttons or small antlers starting to grow off the heads of the bucks. If you don't see any antlers starting to grow right now, then you're probably looking at does. Those are the females, but the bucks, the males, are starting to grow their antlers. Now, for those antlers to get from this size to that size by the end of the summer means that they are growing those antlers in about 4 to 5 months. Antler bone is the fastest growing type of bone in all of the animal kingdom. Last but not least, in our rundown of phenology for mid to late April, let's talk a little bit about black bears. Now, black bears are all out of hibernation at this point, and they are desperately seeking food sources. These animals are largely vegetarian. About 80 to 90% of their diet is plant material, so leaves, nuts, berries, fruits, and some of those sources can be a little bit hard to find this time of year. So bears are easily attracted to food sources that are easy to find, like bird feeders and trash in your garbage cans. So this is a great time of year, if you haven't done so already, to go ahead and bring those bird feeders in. The birds will be fine. They have much smaller tummies. They don't need to find quite as much food to keep them well fed. And also try to put your garbage cans out the morning of trash pickup as opposed to the night before. If you do those things, you have much less of a chance of attracting black bears onto your property. They are beautiful animals, and it's amazing that we have them out in the wild, but we don't want to get them used to coming right into our yards to get their food sources. All right, I'm going to end each one of my Nature's News video clips with a suggestion for a nature activity that you can play at home with your family members. So this one is called Kim's Game, and Kim's Game is basically a game of memory. So what you would do first is you would go out on your property or in the woods or some natural area and pick up a few noticeable items around you. Like here I have a pine cone, a walnut, an acorn cap, a feather, a piece of bark, some lichen, a maple samara, a dandelion leaf, a rock, and a burr from a burdock plant. It really doesn't matter what you collect. They just have to be different items. Try to gather about 10 to 12 of them. And when you bring them back inside, you're just going to lay them out on a piece of paper or somewhere on a table and gather your family members around. And what comes next is you give them about 30 seconds to look at these items. So keep them covered until it's time for them to look at the items. Then you uncover them for about 30 seconds. Give them a chance to commit as many of these as possible to memory. Give them a chance, about 30 seconds, and then you're going to cover them right back up again. And you're going to ask everyone in your family to go get a piece of paper and write down from memory as many of the items as they can remember. And of course, whoever thinks of the most items wins the game. Thank you so much for joining me for this first edition of Nature's News. I hope you've enjoyed learning about the natural events that are happening all around us here during April. Today was a rather rainy, blustery April day, but hey, April showers bring May flowers. So we're excited for the events that are coming up in the next couple weeks, and I will be back again with another edition of Nature's News. Take care, everyone.